call the meeting to order. Before I start, I would like to... Ready? Let's go ahead and try again. Oh, sounds clear on it. Before we start and do the roll call, I'd like to first welcome Gary Gelzer, our new member to the City Council. For those of you in the audience, he has already been sworn in, but we're going to have a little formal ceremony before the start of the actual council meeting. With that, can you call the roll call there, City Clerk? Here. Here.
Vice Mayor Flo.
Here.
Councilmember Osborne. Here. Councilmember Lortano. Councilmember Gelzer.
Here.
All here.
With that, tonight we're going to talk about the city Goodyear budget process and the overview, and cheers, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This evening we are going to, this is a budget calendar. I'll review this briefly for you, and then have Terry Canada walk us through a budget presentation. This session tonight, 110, and I'm sorry if you can't read it up there, 110 budget process. We're going to review the municipal budgeting principles, the GFOA standards, the council's role, the manager's role, public participation, historical budget overview, and the budget calendar. And then a work session, we're going to do a council policy review, thank you, where you're able to make decisions, prioritize, and how budgets, policies are implemented, have advanced the priorities, and a review of budget policies. Then a work session in the future, and I'd like right now to just ask, we had put out a notice that there would be a quote, retreat work session on January 31st. That doesn't work for everybody, and so we're looking right now of holding a meeting on Monday the 7th, if that works for everybody.
February 7th?
February 7th, because there is no meeting scheduled right now for that Monday. So we will check tomorrow, but
Since we're discussing that, on that, we have, I was going to bring it up later, but we have on Valentine's Day a work session. Is it possible to combine that with if we're going to have this special meeting? Because that's a busy day for me. So,
I understand, and we can certainly check on that in the morning.
Since we're talking about a new meeting on the 7th, that's why I'm asking if it's possible to add it with it or something.
Okay, we'll sure check and see.
So tomorrow...
The 7th.
Well, the only thing I would suggest is maybe tomorrow we'll fire off some times and see if we can get some schedules of everybody here that kind of agrees. So.
Okay. During that retreat, what we'll do is discuss tax policy, sales tax, who spends money in our city, Goodyear compared to other cities, dashboard review, council direction, tax reductions, property tax and overview, options, floating, flat rates and impacts, and then a revenue impact in February of 2011. Then during February, we'll have a work session, which is... I apologize if that's me. A work session on the 10 and 11 second quarter financial reports. And we will have for you the actual expenditures, the year-end estimate review, 11 and 12 critical item, high-level overview, and priority discussion. Then during March, we will have a revenue update, updated 5-year projections, including the 2011 Arizona League legislative priorities and state-shared revenues. We will also have 2010 census impact at that time, tax policy discussions, revenue enhancements, and reserve fund minimum requirements. Then later there will be a work session on compensation and benefits annual survey, which we're undertaking right now, and a historical reduction of benefits, what we've done already to reduce those. And there will be a public meeting. Staff will hold a public meeting with the budget process and a public, in a public forum proposal. We will also have a work session on fiscal year 11-12 draft capital improvement program, fiscal year 11-12 expenditure estimates with the base budget, critical items for consideration in fiscal year 11 and 12, and the impact to the structural deficit. Then in April, we'll have a work session on balanced budget proposal, a high-level recap of revenues and expenditures, a review of new considerations, a review of tax policies, a review of CIP projects, and get council direction and staff follow-up. And then a work session on the additional follow-up from the balanced budget proposal work session and receive further council direction. In May, we will have a work session reserved for following up from the balanced budget proposal work session, should it be needed, and I assume it will. And the regular meeting will have tentative budget adoption to include review of any modifications based on council feedback. And in June work session, we have a reserve for a follow-up from the tentative budget adoption. And then the regular meeting in June, the final budget is adopted. And then the footnote, the fiscal year 11-12 budget action is to adopt the property tax levy, and that's as usual in July of 2011. Yes, Joe?
Just real quick. We've got some issues with the state right now on how they're balancing their budget, and how do you see that kind of working in this overall process? If you get down the road too far and you have a budget that you think is balanced and something comes in from the state, are we going to have enough time for adjustments for that?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We're making sure that we have enough time for adjustments, that we are proactively seeing what type of adjustments will be necessary, dependent on what actions the state takes. So.
Okay. Back in January, can you just go back one more slide? When we were talking about the retreat, and I know with the schedules it's tough for everybody on here, but I know in the past when we used to have those retreats, 3 to 4 hours where we can actually hash things out, as a group, it laid a lot of the foundation as we would move forward, and we haven't had, and I know times have been an issue, especially with a lot of your work schedules, but if you could, when you start the schedule for that retreat, and I know some of those dates, could you try to see if we could get a block of time in there? I don't know if the others are receptive, but I always felt that if we could sit down for more than just a couple hours, maybe 3 to 4, and talk about this, we could lay the groundwork as we move forward.
As you know, we were trying to do a retreat for one like you mentioned, and we could not find agreement on the council at the time of holding a retreat date. So now we've gone to this new schedule, and we'll try again.
Okay, if you would, I would appreciate that, just to see, and again, I know everybody's time is tight, but I think if we sat down and worked through that, I think we'd be pleasantly, the resolution of what we may come up with if we're sitting in those times, especially as we kind of go forward with some of the issues. But just a suggestion, I know you've got to work on it after this, time, maybe tomorrow or whatever, but just a thought for everybody on the council, if we can, I think we could get a lot out of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Along with that, in the past, we've used a Friday afternoon. Is that?
Well, we'll open that up, but now when are you out of town?
From 31st through the 9th, or 8th? No, that's not true. I'll have to look on the schedule.
Why don't we just...
That's a Monday, right? The one you're talking
Yes.
about? Okay, then I'm back on Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that.
Okay,
We just, let's see if we can
About a 4
find
day,
something
yeah.
else to...
okay, thank you. With that, I will turn it over to Terry Canada, our budget manager, and she will walk through tonight's presentation. Terry?
Can you hear me? Is this on? So John just went through the technical calendar of the
I don't think that's on here.
Try this one.
Do they have on? How's this? Yes? Very good? Okay, great. John just went through the technical calendar for the budget process this year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes, and it's kind of enjoyable for me because I don't get to get in front of this group often without talking about numbers. So there's not a lot of numbers we're going to talk about. It's more of the philosophy and kind of a little bit on, I'm going to say definition, education of some municipal financing. I'm going to go through it. I probably have 25 slides. I'm going to try to get through the accounting and budgeting pretty quick. If you have any questions, again, feel free to ask. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of what I'll call like state of the city and kind of how we got to where we're at and what's going on with Arizona. And then I'm going to move forward to the 12 budget process and kind of our some underlying principles that we're trying to put in place to keep the finances in order. So with that, I'm just going to go through governmental accounting. This is actually from the course we do for the Citizens Academy, so it's pretty basic and brief. The Accounting provides accountability for the city. I wanted to point out here that the budget is a law. We're actually governed by Arizona state statutes, revised statutes on this, and there are a number of forms that we fill out and that we submit, and they are reviewed at the Auditor General's office. Within the city here, we have over 90 funds. We use governmental fund accounting for that. The funds are designed to separate and segregate the revenues and expenditures based on the purpose of the fund. The other thing is that all this together, the segregating, the keeping track of everything, is a good tool for management to use. We had a couple questions during last year's budget process about the CVC. And so quite simply, the financial policies are the guidelines that provide the parameters in which we develop the financial plan. And we also follow those and check on them throughout not only the planning process, but during the year as the activity continues. The budget is the financial plan of the city. It's the plan that we prepare for the following fiscal year, which starts in July. And it runs, I'll get into the process a little more here, but it is a full year process, a lot of planning going on, and then again, adoption in July. The CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that's the report at the end of the year that shows all the financial activity that has taken place. So it's two different things. And actually, Teresa is responsible for the CAFR, and then my side of the house is the budget. This lists the fund types. Pretty basic. There's general, special revenue, or usually used for grants. We do put HERF money in there. Capital projects, there's a fund type. Debt service, pretty self-explanatory. The enterprise funds, we right now run one for water, wastewater, sanitation, and technically the stadium is an enterprise fund also. And the idea there is it's like a business operation. And then we also have internal service funds, and those are to support other departments within the city.
Could you just briefly expand on the capital project funds?
The capital project funds, it's where you would put, like right now we would put the bond proceeds if we sold a bond, and then we were going to do a capital street or a park or something like that.
For example, a good example is the current one that you're looking at, we're looking at the 157th Street master planning process. That's in a separate fund.
Okay. I guess what the question maybe I wasn't as clear is the impact fees, or is that on another sheet?
That would be special revenue,
Okay.
and they're kind of like a sub of the.
I don't want to get you too far, but I guess the point I'm getting at is with those funds is when we get into the development or impact fees, they can only be spent for specific things, and that is it. So.
And we do have, I'm going to guess, 13 separate impact fees. Every impact fee runs its own fund.
Okay.
So we don't commingle any of the funds for the impact fees.
And that's important because we've heard a little bit of that in the past. So. Go ahead.
So basically, what is a budget? A budget is a mechanism used to meet the needs of the community. It would provide a plan for infrastructure, utilities, make sure we're staying out ahead of that. We always have to have water and wastewater prior to any development. It provides the planning for public safety to allow us to maintain response times, and as well as participate in recreation, health, and welfare programs.
Now, question on that. Where do salaries come in on that? I mean, they're not listed separately. Each separate outlined area has its own salary. I mean, where are
So
staff salaries?
back to the funds or the programs. The salaries would be blended within all of these
Each one of them.
categories.
So that each one of those departments, then the salaries are within
Right.
that. Okay.
It's just kind of designed to show you the
I'm trying to think,
Breadth of the-
being outside, and we got to take care of what's inside the door too. Yeah.
all of those areas have salaries. Even the infrastructure, we actually charge the project manager's time to the capital projects. Here are some issues faced by local governments. This is pretty generic. It goes on throughout, the past decades. I'm going to get into some more specific issues that we face based on the financial condition and what we've seen as kind of a major decline in revenue. So some of the examples of political issues faced by the local governments would be, just a second here, how you prioritize your services. It's become quite obviously lately that we have scarce resources, and do we pick one service over the other? Then managerially, how do we link the department's goals and organization goals together? Capital planning is very important. Right now we're seeing a reduction in capital spending, lessened ability to sell bonds. It also provides for stakeholder communication. We've seen a lot of that this year, that some of the issues are more transparency in government, and people want to know what they're getting for their dollar and they're spending their tax dollar. And then, of course, the financial one I'll get more into as we go on. That one's pretty evident. Like I was saying, the cycle for us, especially in the budget office, is a year long. We actually just go around and a cycle here. We were doing this the other day, and they said, "Don't you get dizzy?" But it's develop, propose, approve, monitor, report, and adjust. And you will be involved at many of these stages. We are doing forecasting right now. We'll bring that forward to you in some of the work sessions coming up, and then we'll get into the approve, monitor, report after that. I'd like to touch a little bit on the citizens' role. First and foremost, their role for the budget would be to get involved, to attend work sessions, keep up on the city's programs and policies through maybe the website. We also offer community viewing via Granicus for the meetings. And then get involved. You can be on a board or a commission or committees, and we're seeing a lot more committees nowadays to get people involved in the process. Council's role would be to set the policies, review the budget as we put it together by staff and management, modify the budget as we see that we need changes moving forward. Even after adoption, we have budget amendments that come through that would be modified, and then approval of the annual budget process, or the annual budget. Management and staff roles. We're the number crunchers. We develop the budget, balance it, put it together. City manager proposes it to the council. We also have forums for open meetings for the public so that they can weigh in on that. Staff monitors the budget. We report, and again, we adjust the budget. It's a continual process. There's some budget considerations that are up there, again, repeating community priorities, the economy, growth, mandates. Some things we're looking at this year, and I think everyone in the Valley is kind of wrestling with, this employee benefits and training. We've taken a big hit in the last few years, and your workforce doesn't stay as in tune as they can be. We've also looked at reserves and replacement of equipment and had to deal with deferred maintenance. And all of these things you'll be seeing again coming before you. So how do they set priorities? Why one project instead of the other? We see a lot of community needs. 5 years ago we were growing here. We built the subdivisions. We needed the streets, the lights, the parks. And then we have, governmental needs. We follow a lot of mandates, and we, in some sense, do monitoring, regulating, and reporting. We also have the impact on financial resources, which would, again, drive whether you could do a project, whether you could do it this year or in 5 years. And then putting that all together, how do you maintain sustainability? So I want to talk a little bit about kind of shifting gears leading into that, what we have employed for some strategies in dealing with the economic downturn. And not to belabor this, we talked about it a lot, but how did we get here? Everything was doing great. We averaged 10 to 15% increase in sales tax, and property values went skyrocketed. And then the impact on government was, with all of that, it came fast, it came furious. Now we had a lot of cash, but we had increased staff. We had big demand for service level increases. The CIP was, going full force. We had $200 million in big capital projects. So with all that said, I just kind of want to pictorially show we were up, we were on the top, we were doing good, but then you can see that right at the top we also went down about a little bit, almost as fast as we went up. With that, Arizona itself went from ranking third as an employer. A lot of that was in service sector, having to do with construction, some of the other base industries, semiconductor, tourism, retirement. We were booming, we were great, everyone wanted to be here. How did we go from third to 49th? And I think we're probably still right around 49th, maybe a little bit up. Everybody knows the story. The housing market just skyrocketed. We didn't have enough inventory. All of a sudden, then the housing boom turned to bust. We went from, as a local metropolitan area, issuing 6,500 permits in a month down to about an average of 500. And we have felt that more severely here in Goodyear than they have in some of the other parts of the valley.
That started your chart starts in 2008? Yeah. I can't see.
Yeah, the permit.
2003.
Right.
Okay.
And actually the activity in the booming was kind of back a little bit from the peak
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
that
expenditures
makes
and the
sense.
revenue. Oops. And like I said, we felt that more dramatically even out here in the West. Some of the symptoms were all of a sudden we weren't experiencing growth and very few revenues. We were depleting our fund balance, using that to pay for the ongoing expenditures because it just the decline came so quickly and no one could have predicted it. We're facing a structural deficit in the general fund, unheard of almost, the last 20 years in the valley. It just hasn't been that way. So everyone, most of the cities and towns were faced with, what do we do? Where are we at? So a couple options here, probably obvious to everyone. We increase revenues, we decrease expenses, and we begin to evaluate programs and service delivery. How can we do more with less, I guess? So here's kind of where we're at. Last year, I think the message was, are we at the bottom or not? I think now the things we're seeing in the news and with some of the other government finance agencies, I think this is out of Pollock, who is an economist in the Valley. We now think we're at the bottom. We're at or near the bottom. So there is some good news with that. The bad news, working into this year's budget, again, no growth, very stagnant. Again, how do we maintain service levels from that boom with, restriction on funding and not a lot of new funding coming forth? So we've tried to incorporate some of this fiscal health and wellness, if you will, into the budget process here at Goodyear. I just wanted to get some examples of some of the things that we've been doing here. We now prepare 5-year forecasts for all the major operating funds. We've also developed some tools. I think we've all seen the dashboard tool that Anna did that does some scenario planning with sales tax. That's phenomenal. It just allows us to give you better information to make decisions. There's been a big effort into becoming more transparent. We put a lot of the financial data out on the website. We also publish both the CAFR and the budget documents on the website for public viewing. Internally, we've held quarterly meetings with all the departments to get a better understanding of what their spending patterns are, their budgets that they develop versus what actually happens throughout the year. And then there's been increased, I guess you could say, highlight or scrutiny on the reserves and what level that should be at and how well we're doing to maintain and establish the right level. So moving into 12, there's a couple key things that we'd like to incorporate into the budget. One is diversity. We're always looking for different ways to enhance our revenue stream. Again, make sure there's no single point of failure. Redundancy, I guess some of the good examples for that would be we've reached out to our neighbors and we have some new water coming in from the Adaman water group there. Transparency, again, back to the website and some of the things that we're now making public that we've never done before. Collaboration, a few things. One that was a really good example from last year was the IGA with Litchfield Park. I know everyone is searching out to do things with neighboring cities. There's some collaboration going on with Avondale, I think with the firefighter and some service there. And then flexibility. We've never seen this more than the last couple years in government. One example I have that says there, be ready to change when the plans aren't working. It's the first time we've ever developed contingency budgets. I mean, we've literally had, 2 years ago, we did 15% reduction programs, and then we also had 3 different scenarios on the revenue. So best case, moderate, and worst case. And then foresight, think and prepare. This is another thing that I think as governments we've probably been able to maintain and get along without having to think so far ahead. We actually prepared a 10-year forecast during the budget process last year for a couple of the management sessions. So with that being said, where do we go from here? So here are some top things that are coming up for consideration in 12. We're going to bring the revenues back to you. Right now we're developing forecasts working with a lot of departments. We actually have a meeting on Wednesday to bring a group together to do revenue forecasting based on what they see going on in their line of business, and then what we see as far as revenue trending going on, anything that we hear from the state, what are the neighbors hearing as far as revenues go. And then we're going to do a council survey. I think perhaps that might weave into the retreat, and again talk about program priorities and level of service, which is becoming increasingly difficult with less funding. I'm going to keep going on the cooperative agreements, alternative service delivery, and then fortunately we're going to have to deal with some budget gap strategies because we are facing a deficit.
Real quick, just pause there for just 1 second. On the service levels on the survey that you had talked about for the council, did we have any, and I know at one time Paul, our economic development director, had done some surveys with the public. Did they ever rank the services on how 1 to 10, or do we have anything that?
Not in 1 to 10, but we do have plenty of information from the last citizen survey that we're using on the basis of which programs are considered most important and things like that. So yes, we're using that information.
So you'll give that back to us in some form, and when we do our surveys as well. Okay.
Okay, and then back to the calendar here. Again, I just want to point out we have a number of work sessions that are scheduled January, February, March. That's when we're pulling it all together. We'll be bringing you back some policy discussions, also detailed discussions on where we're seeing expenditures this year, which will impact your fund balance, how the revenues are trending for this year, and then moving forward. Again, this is mostly the technical aspect. There'll be a lot of discussion and deliberation in April. That's the main month where you folks are involved in helping us balance the budget, keep it in balance, the ins and outs. And then technically in May and June we put the schedules together, get the advertisements going, all the legal requirements, and hopefully we'll adopt later in June, and then the property tax the 1st of July, 1st or 2nd week of July. So with that, is there any questions on the process?
I had one question. About a year ago, and it came up again recently, I attended the State of the State type, kind of what you're talking about right now, but for the actual state of Arizona. A 2-year budget process. I mean, I think you even mentioned, John, in the past that you've done that.
In all of the cities I've been in before Goodyear, we have implemented a 2-year budget process and done it. So,
Is it that difficult to change that strategy to do a 2-year budget? In some regards, you kind of already are. You've been showing, many years just because we're trying to forecast. But to say policy-wise, let's change it to a 2-year budget.
I think would be a good thing for us to work towards. There is no statutory ability to do that, but it doesn't prevent us from doing it more consistently than we have in the past. So I think we're moving there, and we're comfortably getting to the point where we will be able to do that. I would guess within the next year or so. Right?
We're researching, we're
Yeah.
ready.
When revenues improve.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great idea. Joanne, the real benefits of a 2-year budget, in addition to like the 5-year forecast we're doing now, a 2-year budget allows you to work a little more diligently during the off year in preparing different studies and analyses. So it just works beautifully from the city standpoint.
Well, I remember you speaking of that, and it seems kind of logical, but then it was mentioned again at this conference on the state level, and so I thought, well, we should talk about it. Okay,
We will get back to you with some additional information also with regards to that.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Councilmember Gelser?
John, my question is on our capital plans. We still have a rolling 5-year budget that we continue to work on. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Good. And so by incorporating, the capital plan is entirely separate from the annual budget?
It's
or
separate from the
2-year?
entire budget, and it's a fully funded plan. And so the programs that get in there are only those that are capable of being fully funded from impact fees, which is our primary source right now, or some other source, that a grant or something like that that may come available. But we do a 5-year rolling capital budget.
And the capital projects that we're in the process of implementing it this year have been funded by impact fees.
Most of them, yes.
For 80 or 90% of it.
Most of it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Souza? Councilmember Cavalier? Are we good?
Let me, go ahead.
I just have a question. You were saying before you were doing several budgets, and this year, obviously, the legislature, the deficit on the state level is extremely high. How are we preparing? Are we going to prepare an alternative as well this year in case, because if they go out of session or don't have a budget when ours is due, how do we do that?
Well, I was going to say, we're hopeful that we'll get estimates from them. They usually give it to us in February or March.
Okay.
And so with that in mind, we won't have final revenue until we get those numbers from them.
But we will do some contingency planning. We'll be working with the council in a different package. If, for example, the worst were to happen and the state were to do away with 25% of our state shared revenue. That's one of the scenarios we're looking at right now. What would that mean to us? It would mean that we would lose approximately $2 to $2.5 million. What would we do if that happened? We can use our rainy day fund as a way of easing into something like that, but we will be developing several scenarios for the council to look at.
Councilmember Cavalier?
yeah, along with some of that, I guess my question was going to be, how much does the state shared revenues impact the budget? I guess you just said that.
17%.
17%?
17%
Is
state shared revenue. of
so
the
if
general
we were
fund.
to lose that,
If we were to lose
you have a
state shared
contingency.
revenue, it's a total of $8 million that we would lose out of our general fund.
are we working on a contingency just in case that might happen? Or do you have any plans in
I
mind?
don't think so, Frank. I don't think that that's a possibility.
I hope not.
The city of Phoenix, I had told Joanne the other day that state shared revenues were 54%. That was incorrect. And I'm getting some numbers to you in the next day or two. City of Phoenix is at, I think it's 37%, somewhere in that neighborhood, of the entire general fund is state shared revenues. It's significant. Ours is only 17% because we collect more sales taxes per capita than Phoenix and things like that. But I just don't see a scenario how the state could possibly do that. Will we have a scenario of what to do should it happen? Yes, we will.
Okay, that's my concern. And so that we do, in case something, I mean, the roof falls in, we better have a plan. The CAFR report, that comes out, when, in July? At the end
The
of
CAFR report, Teresa works on the CAFR for about 4 months. I want to say the published document is right at, it probably just came out in December.
But
It's
that's
for
for
the-
the last fiscal year
Yeah,
up to the
end
first.
closes date-wise on June 30, but the activity continues for about 4
Okay.
or 5 months after.
Okay. And have we received that for this
We do
year?
have the CAFR.
The council's received it, the audit committee has looked at it, met with the auditor, and gone over that during December.
Okay, that's the book.
Yes,
Yes,
It's
okay.
green.
The green, yeah.
Yeah,
the green.
yeah, okay. And then you talked about, in your schedule, of new considerations. And I don't know whether you said that, John, or whether Terry was talking about. I think you, in your
Yes.
schedule. What do you mean by new considerations? Is
Well,
that,
for example, we have to sort out what types of things will be coming up this year that are new and to the budget. For example, what is it?
Healthcare package.
The healthcare package will be well, we'll hear from Dean tonight what that will be increasing. But things like that will be challenges. For example, the vehicles, that was such a discussion last year. That will obviously be another point of discussion for this year. The
Roads?
the roads, the maintenance, the landscaping that Joanne has discussed, the costs of excuse me, upgrading our landscaping to the point where everything is uniform. What would that cost the city? So those are the types of things that we have to consider. I call them new just because they're out of the ordinary for the city.
That was my concern, because I was wondering if that comes out of general budget or general fund, or?
It depends where the financing would be, but most of it will probably be general fund, yes.
Just to clarify, I mentioned that we need to have that in plan, but I didn't expect it to be funded this year. I want you to know that. I just thought for the future, it needs to be there. So, okay.
You good, Frank?
When you go ahead.
go ahead.
After you.
The only thing is, I think it's important on the services when we get the survey from the citizens and the council, because if you have to do a contingency, to me, it's critical, to prioritize the services on the ones you provide. So, to me, tying it into what the citizens wanted and how they prioritize it is important. And again, going back to the state of the state, I was there with Joanne and Gary as well, and they had some interesting suggestions on how the state may attach it. The only concern is whether they'll really have the political will to do it, because there was some really interesting ways of trying to broaden both their base as far as taxes, and then also looking at cutting with a combination. But we'll have to see how all that kind of pans out as well. So, but it was a very worthwhile, I thought, presentation that they gave us when we were all there. So, with that, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. John, in view of the improved retail picture throughout the United States, have we had any movement at all with Westcor on Estrella Fall?
Interesting that you ask that. I can't answer. We don't know. But we have scheduled a meeting with Westro because of what you'll hear tonight, for example, from Paula in a few moments about the announcements of things that are happening. Quite frankly, those could have happened with Estrella Falls if they were here. So we're going to be talking to them about what are their latest timetables. If they wanted to do a timetable that would open in 2013, they have to start pretty soon.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm thinking. Why don't
we
they?
don't know, but we're working on it.
Well, I think in my own opinion, that if they started the construction now, it would be ready for 2012. And that is where our additional income would come from. That's the $1 million at least in sales tax coming from that.
It's several $1 million at 50% because of our incentive package that we have.
So, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we all good? All right, with that, council members' reports on current events, or we want to wait till the meeting? Manager's summary on current events?
Nothing right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, meeting adjourned.